Hi, I'm Ed.
Hi, I'm Hugh. Welcome to Tone Twins TV, and in this episode we're going to be doing
Fuzz! So Hugh, this is a funny looking vintage guitar.
I know, pedals aren't our usual stock in trade. We leave that to certain other people, but you can't beat a good fuzz box. And about a year ago, I wrote an article for Guitar Magazine showing people how to build their own Fuzz Face clone, and we thought it'd be a great thing to put on Tone Twins TV to actually show you on video how it's done.
But this isn't quite a standard Fuzz Face, is it?
Not quite. There's this eternal debate with fuzz faces about whether the silicon one's better or the germanium ones are better. So rather than try and decide one way or another, we figured out a way to make a fuzz face clone which runs on both silicon and germanium transistors. The Fuzz Face is a legendary pedal, and we've all heard them on countless recordings. But the problem with buying vintage ones, beside the expense, is that some of them sound pretty mediocre, some of them sound dreadful, and apparently Eric Johnson has bought up all the really good ones. There are two key Fuzz Face eras. Arbiter Electronics started making Fuzz Faces in 1966 using NKT275 PNP transistors. They're great sounding transistors, but the problem is they're notoriously inconsistent, and they're also very susceptible to ambient temperature. Arbiter merged with Dallas Electronics in 1968, and by the end of that year they'd made the transition from germanium transistors to NPN silicon transistors. Of course, the germanium and silicon versions sound different, and one complicating factor with PNP germanium transistors is they happen to be incompatible with a lot of modern power supplies because the positive rather than the negative is grounded. The reason that this fuzzbox is able to run with germanium and silicon transistors is that I'm using NPN germanium transistors. So let's see how it's done. After carefully marking out the box, I use this pillar drill to drill all these pilot holes. I take measurements of the diameter of all the parts that need to be mounted on the box so I can use the appropriate size drill bit and get all the holes ready for mounting up the hardware. Be careful with all these sharp bits of metal because they can cut your hands. Here's all the parts that are going to be going onto the box. So I've got these two transistor switches. I've got my DC power socket. I've got a stereo jack and a mono jack socket, on-off switch. Here's a what's called a standoff, which will separate the circuit board, which I've already made, from the enclosure, and a couple of screws to attach it. Here's the bezel for the LED, and I've got 3 potentiometers, so that's 1K for the fuzz, 470K for the level, and 47K for the fuller mod. And here's the box I've made. I've pre-drilled it, and then I've put a water slide decal over the top. This is Wenglish for fuzz, in case you're wondering, and these symbols are for level, fuzz, and the fuller mod. 32 and 14 are the atomic numbers of germanium and silicon respectively, and all the holes are ready for the hardware to mount up, which I'll do next. Okay, so pretty much everything is mounted up on here. The circuit board will eventually mount on top of the standoff there, and I've got room in between the LED bezel there and where the switch will go for the battery. Okay, well, we're going to put the board together now. I've made this this was double-sided copper board for doing printed circuits, and I just dissolved off the copper, so I'm left with this glass epoxy board. I just drilled the holes, mounted the turrets using a staking tool, and that's pretty much the way I do all my circuit boards. Okay, so there are just a handful of components here. I've got 2 resistors, and 4 trim pots, and I'm going to put 1 link wire as well. So I'm going to show you how I do this. Basically, let's get this 100k resistor on first. You can check out the circuit diagram on the article on guitar.com, and also it'll flash up on the screen. So you can pause on that and take a look if you want. Maybe do a screen grab. Okay, so I'm just tightly wrapping the component legs around the turret. So I've got a good mechanical contact, and that's really neat. I'm going to put this 470R resistor, make sure I got my gold band going the same way as the other one. Not that it makes any difference whatsoever, it just kind of looks neater. I've actually got 1 turret more than I actually need on here. Don't really need to put this one on. I guess it looks better with than without, but yeah, I put it in and it occurred to me afterwards that I don't really need it. Okay, so we've got these 3 bits done, 2 resistors and a link wire. Now, what I've got to do is I've got to turn these trim pots into variable resistors. So, and the way to do that is that you can take this middle leg, let's see if I can get this close in, to this middle leg and wrap it around. There you go. If I splay these legs out now, just going to put a little dab of solder on there, and this trim pot actually just becomes a variable resistor. Because it's a 50k trim pot, that resistance varies from 0 to 50k. So it gives me a lot of leeway for setting the bias of the transistors. Right, so I've got 2 20k trim pots and 2 50k ones. The 50ks are going to go on this side, and the 20ks are going to go on the other. Okay, going to get onto this on-off switch now, and the first thing I've got to do is this little link wire between pins 1 and 2. I've dropped the temperature of the soldering iron down a little bit as well. If you use too much heat on these surprisingly expensive switches, you can end up kind of melting them, and that's not really what you want. Okay. Going to snip off the excess. Okay, so we've got our little link wire there. I'm going to do another link wire now between this pin here, which is pin 8, and pin 3. Now, I'm not going to solder this one just yet, because this pin here has actually got to go to the input jack tip. So rather than clog it up with solder and make my life difficult later on, I'm just going to leave that in situ. Okay, so I've put the on-off switch in the box, and I've just hooked up this 22 microfarad capacitor, this blue one, which is on the fuzz control. So it's connected across these two lugs, the center one and the outside one, and I've kept the leg long on the ground side so that it can actually ground against the casing of the pot. Because electrolytic capacitors are polarized, you have to make sure that you connect this one the right way round. So now I'm going to make a connection from pin 5, which is this center one of the switch, to the fuller mod pot over here, and I've got nice long legs on this capacitor, so I'm going to put some heat shrink on there and actually use the legs of the capacitor to bridge between here and here. I'm making a change to the circuit. I don't actually like that kind of real low-end woofiness in a fuzz face. It just gets on my nerves, really. I mean, I understand why people like it, but for general playing, I think I just find them too bassy. So I'm reducing the value of the input capacitor to 10 nanofarads, which is quite a bit smaller than the 2.2 microfarad electrolytic capacitor that is used in the standard circuit. And it also gives me the chance to use a smaller capacitor, so it's actually a film capacitor, which may or may not have sonic benefits. Anyway, I'm going to put some heat shrink over these legs. There we are. I've got some heat shrink on there. It's a little bit loose, but as long as it's doing its duty to insulate the wire, that's absolutely fine. Couldn't find my smaller stuff. So what I want to do is wire this fuller control as a variable resistor, just as I did with the trim pots on the circuit board. So I'm just going to take off a little bit of this heat shrink from the end. Okay, so the other lug there will connect straight onto the circuit board. Let's carry on doing these switch wires though. So pin 3 here is actually going to go to the input jack tip, and the input jack tip is going to be that one there. Now this pin here, pin 4, actually goes to ground, so for the ground point I'm going to use this tag here on the input jack. Okay, so I've got a really good mechanical connection there for the ground. I suspect that I'll need to make a few ground connections, and I need somewhere to do it, so I'm going to leave that unsoldered for now, but it has been soldered onto the switch itself. This spare one here is actually going to go to the negative of the LED. So the next connection I want to make is actually the output of the pedal, and that's got to go to the tip of the output jack. And so I'm going from pin 6 here to this tag here on the output jack. Okay, I'm going to make another ground connection here. I'm just going to bend this tag over. This is the volume control. Just going to bend it, twist it, and then push it down against the casing. Again, I like to get mechanical contact if possible. And yeah, they are touching, and I'm just going to get some solder in there. It's flowed down nicely, and the next thing I'm going to do is connect switch pin 9 to the center tag of the volume control. Okay, so the only connection we haven't made on this switch is the LED connection, which we'll do later. I realized that I'd actually made a mistake on this capacitor here. I'd put in too small a value. I'd confused it with the output capacitor, so I've changed that one, and the output capacitor has been moved from here to here. So these are all ready to hook up. I've put a wire on this fuller mod pot here and another one on the fuzz control. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to put in the LED, and I'm also going to put in the power socket as well, and probably the battery clip too. After that I can hook up the board and get these all important transistors in. It's quite a tight fit with this DC socket. This is only the second one of these that I've built, so I think some minor refinements to the design and layout would probably be a good idea, but it'll be fine for now. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So there's the power socket there. So this connection here is going to be for the battery. This is the negative, which is going to jumper across to the ring connection of the input jack, so that makes the circuit when the jack plug is inserted, and kills the power when the jack is taken out. So that's how you keep your battery from running down. And this tag here is actually where the power lead is taken out to connect to the circuit board. It's easy to lose track of which wire is which in this situation, but using the continuity setting on your meter, which makes this beep when there's continuity, you can just identify where these connections are. So this wire here is actually the wire that's running off the fuzz potentiometer. So that's going to connect onto the other end of this 100k resistor. Got one more wire here, which is connected to the DC supply, and that's going to go into this last turret here in between the two 50k trim pots. Okay, and there's one more connection that needs to be made, and it's from this solitary turret at the end here to the ground connection. This is a permanent ground connection. I'm going to use a bit of black wire for this. You may remember that I didn't actually solder this ground connection from the pot from the switch onto the jack socket, because I knew I had to do some more soldering to this particular tag. I didn't want to fill it up with solder. I think this is probably the last of the ground connections I'm going to need to make, but just in case, I'm going to leave this unsoldered for a second. One more connection I do need to make is from this tag on the DC socket to the ring connection of the input jack. So I'm going to do the same again with a little bit of this black wire. Again, I'm not actually going to solder this this connection, because I want to connect the negative of the battery clip to this particular tag as well. Then I think, apart from the battery clip, the only other things I have to do is connect up the transistors.
Wow, so a lot of work already done. We'll take a break there. What's coming up in part 2?
Well, part 2 is where we really get into the meat and potatoes of this thing, because what we're going to be doing is selecting transistors. So I'm going to show you how I select transistors that are suitable for this type of circuit. Then I'm going to be putting them in the circuit and showing you how to fine-tune the biasing of those transistors to make what could be quite a mediocre sounding fuzz face into something that sounds really, really good.
Brilliant. Look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.
Ta bon.